welcome back to the 12 Days of ChrisBondmas, and today we're looking at a game from the James Bond series from Russia with Love. Technically, I did announce a James Bond review series back on the channel in 2015, but I never really got around to the game, so I'll take it as a Christmas miracle that I get to one now. From Russia with Love is a movie-based tie-in, but it's obviously not tied into the film's release since that was back in 1963, so this is a strange movie-based tie-in since it's not complicated by the shorter development time, which means I'm probably going to have to look at this a bit more critically than I do when I look at other movie tie-ins. So, does From Russia with Love rise above the usual flaws of movie tie-ins, or is it best left forgotten? So at this point in time, the James Bond series was in the hands of EA. And while that might make you start groaning and going, oh boy, I'm here to say that EA actually had a surprisingly good handle on that franchise. They made 8 James Bond titles during their times with the rights, each one trying something different with the formula, but not straying too far from what worked. You know, unlike the 8 Harry Potter games they made, where they couldn't stop frickin' with the formula. Most of the EA titles were movie tie-ins like Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough, though they made a few original titles like Agent Under Fire and Nightfire. Some of the EA titles were first-person shooters, while others they were third-person shooters. Seriously, they couldn't seem to figure out which one worked better. I think every time it's a first-person shooter, they're trying to capture the success of GoldenEye on the N64, and when it doesn't quite live up to those heights, they pull the camera back and say, okay, third-person, and then when that gets a good pass, they go, well, let's try first-person again. I don't know, maybe they spin a spinner on the wall, throw darts, I don't know, something like that, I guess, to change it. From Russia with Love took on the third-person perspective, and honestly that's my personal favorite type of Bond game since it allows for cooler action set pieces. I just feel like it's better to see Bond doing something than to pretend I'm him and looking around. It's just, I don't know, it's weird. It's unclear why EA chose to make From Russia with Love at this point in time, though it might have been because the Bond franchise was on a bit of a weird hiatus itself at this point. See, Nightfire was the tie-in game when Die Another Day came out in 2002. The movies wouldn't return until 2006, and while EA had announced that they would make a game based on Casino Royale, they eventually came out saying that that game was canned since they wouldn't make the film's release date, and then they didn't want to make third-party games based on other people's properties anymore, and thus they let the rights expire and go over to Activision, because that was so much better. So From Russia with Love is based on the film, and it follows that plot pretty damn accurately. The game takes some liberties by adding playable action sequences in places where nothing happened, but it all fits naturally. Honestly, I feel like this close representation of the film's plot might have something to do with the fact that it's being made decades later. There's no guesswork here, there's no pretending that we know what's going to happen, but we don't have a full script to work from. A ton of movie tie-in games tend to omit things or change up the order of plot elements since they're working on, like, limited information. But here, it doesn't have to worry about that. The biggest overall change to the film is the name of the terror organization of Spectre. Again, at this point in James Bond history, they were being plagued by lawsuits preventing them from using the name Spectre and its leader, Blofeld. So here the organization is called Octopus. I guess it works. Levels are based on Bond's time in Istanbul, the Gypsy Camp, and the Orient Express. Though there are some new additions to the plot, such as a new pre-title sequence, the Hedge Mage opening from the film is actually still a level in the game, but it's after the title song. Instead, the game's new opening adds a scene in which Bond must now rescue the Prime Minister's daughter, who's played by Natasha Bedingfield of all people, which I find ironic since she won't be born for another 20 years. The plot also adds another Bond girl in the form of Eva Andara, and she acts as a side villain to main villain Red Grant, and she's played by Maria Menounos. What is with these two casting choices? She contributes little to nothing to the plot, and has like maybe 10 lines, which makes me wonder why she was added. Big Bond fan, is she? Last big change from the original was the ending. In the film, Bond escapes with Tatiana, kills Rosa Klebb, and then pretty much credits. Whereas here, M calls Bond explaining that Octopus is planning to launch a nuke since Bond messed up their original plans. It's here where Bond engages in another fight with Red Grant in this giant laser machine, and it doesn't make any sense because he clearly got friggin' run over by a train earlier, for Christ's sakes. I guess this end tag was included to make the end of the game a little bit more action-y, because the film's ending is pretty lame by video game standards. Overall, I like how the game adapted the plot. It followed it clearly. There's a few changes and a few things that are here that honestly give it enough, even if they don't impact things all that much. The game, like I said, is a third-person action game in which most levels have you moving around, killing enemies, and reaching your mission objectives. The game only has 14 levels, with 4 bonus levels that are shorter, sort of mission-oriented stages. The game also lets you choose difficulty for each stage. You get your easy mode, your normal mode, and your hard as hell mode. The only difference here is that enemies will take more health off of you. Sorry, there's no extra missions to do if you complete it on a higher difficulty. That was something I really liked about GoldenEye, but sometimes the games do this and sometimes they don't. Bond will have access to a plethora of guns by the end, including his signature Walther PPK, a shotgun, machine gun, sniper rifle, and even a rocket launcher sometimes. Helping you out if your ammo gets a tad low or some gadgets from Q. You get the Q-copter, which helps you enter vents and hit out-of-the-way switches. There's the rappel, which has you climbing up walls to reach higher ledges. You also get sonic cufflinks to incapacitate enemies and a briefcase turret, which you can set up to deal with incoming hordes of enemies, though honestly, I think I might have used these once. Sometimes you'll even get to use the jetpack from Thunderbolt, which allows you to deal even more damage to enemy helicopters and jets. The goal of each mission is to complete your objective, which is usually marked on the map. Some levels are linear, while others give you a little bit of freedom to move around as you please. For example, this level Station T asks you to rescue hostages and disarm bombs, and you're actually free to move around this area on your own accord and complete the objectives in any order you want. Helping you dispatch enemies is the Bond Focus mode. When you activate it, you get a zoomed-in perspective of the enemy's weak spots or something in the environment that you can shoot to cause mass damage. Hitting enemies in the weak spot makes you conserve ammo, though it's way cooler to use the focus mode to cause environmental effects on enemies, such as shooting the ropes of repelling enemies and watching them hit the floor. Breaking up the running and gunning are shorter vehicle missions. Several levels put you behind the wheel of Bond's Aston Martin, and with all the bells and whistles included. These sections have you trying to reach a location on the map while destroying the seamlessly ending onslaught of enemies. While in the car, you have access to a machine gun, rockets, and a tire puncture for when enemies get right up next to you. There's a few of these sections, and thankfully they break up the traditional on-foot areas. The other side missions are the on-rails turret sections. A few other levels put you on a turret and have you defending the vehicle that you're attached to. These sections are interesting in that at least it's again something new, but you're kind of at the mercy of your AI driver, and sometimes they don't want to move fast enough or away from incoming fire, and there's no way to seemingly regain health in these areas. I guess I should mention that the game does have a stealth mechanic, and you get to see it used in the second level in the hedge maze. But after that, it's up to you to figure out the best places to use it, and honestly, I only found a few places to try it out. It's a shame, because stealth works well enough in that second level, and maybe if a few sections had involved just, straight stealth and no gunplay, I would have probably gotten more enjoyment out of this. After each level, the game grades you on your performance. You're graded on how many enemies you took down, how fast you completed the level, and if you hit the level's Bond moment, which usually has you doing something badass in the level. If you pass all of the requirements, you gain a skill point. These points unlock bonus content in the extra 4 bonus levels. Most of the bonus stuff is just concept videos of the game's development, though. There are boss fights, though. Most of them become a cakewalk when you realize what the game wants you to do in them. For instance, in the fight with Red Grant at the train yard, I tried hiding behind cover and taking shots, but Grant kept firing at me and taking loads of health off me. I must have retried this fight like 10 times until I finally figured it out. The game wants you to use Bond Focus in this moment, since finally when I decided to give that a shot, I beat Grant in like 5 minutes. You just focus in on his weak spot and he drops, allowing you to take a few extra hits and his health drains. I kind of felt like this mechanic was a bit cheap since the fight was essentially unwinnable until I did exactly what the game wanted, but it felt so specific. Also, the final fight with Grant and that crazy laser machine was a joke, since now apparently I can stand in cover and just take shots and I win. A really nice addition to the gameplay is the research point system. In each level there are collectibles to grab, and unlike in a lot of other movie-based games that are just sort of like bonus things like stills or things from the movie, here they grant you research points, which you can then use in the menu screen to upgrade Bond's health and even your guns. And I really like this, since most games like this wouldn't have even included this kind of an upgrade system. Games like this, most times you're the same character at the title screen as you are when the credits roll. I also like this since it made me actually want to try the game on hard, since I have the upgrades and I can have an easier time with everything, and I think the only reason why I didn't continue on with it is because I had to finish these reviews. The one glaring negative in all this becomes apparent when you select the higher difficulty options. From Russia with Love is pretty stingy with the checkpoints, meaning that if you die, you'll be resetted with a huge chunk of the level over again. Seriously, sometimes you might get through a good chunk of the level and then be dropped back at the beginning. Enemies can rip through you on the harder difficulty, so it's gonna happen a lot. There are a lot of areas where enemies ambush you, and this can lead to you taking a lot of cheap damage. Thankfully, though, there is that upgrade system to get more health and put more ammo into your guns. Otherwise, the harder mode would kind of seem a little unfair. The only other aspect of the game that I hated was the turret section because of the aforementioned AI driver issues. There was just one too many times in one of the last levels on the boat where I felt like the AI was just not up to the task. They hover out into open areas, and they never do a great job of trying to maneuver around the enemies. The AI is on a set course, and if you didn't happen to take out the incoming enemies fast enough, and they cross into your path, you're screwed. Oh, and there's a few checkpoints in these areas as well, so be prepared to slog through it all over again should you fail. Aside from the main game, you have multiplayer, which unfortunately I can't show since I don't have extra controllers, though I heard there was a deathmatch mode, and you could even unlock classic Bond characters like Dr. No and Goldfinger to play as. Multiplayer was always a big thing for Bond games after GoldenEye knocked it out of the park. Thankfully, there is a trailer in the game, so I can actually show this mode off for you guys. It looked action-packed, and it seems like you could even use the gadgets from the campaign. Even the jetpack is in one shot, so it definitely looked like it was, interesting. Presentation-wise, things are really solid. Every level looks like it's ripped straight from the film, and everything is nicely detailed. Frame rate is smooth throughout, whether you're shooting enemies, driving around, or blowing things up. The character models are nice and have great facial features, and everyone looks exactly like the actors and actresses who portrayed them in the original film. And this is actually a big thing to note, since past EA Bond games have had very different looking models for characters that we've seen clearly in the films. Hell, EA didn't even get to use Pierce Brosnan's likeness until they made Nightfire. Yeah, it was a generic model, but kind of looked like Timothy Dalton when I think about it. The best thing about this, though, by far, is that EA somehow got Sean Connery to reprise his role as Bond. And this makes all the difference, since anyone else doing an impression of Connery wouldn't have had the same effect. So how did EA get Connery to do this? Dude didn't even want to come back to the last Indiana Jones movie a few years later, but a video game was the easy sell for him? The music is also top-notch, with several tracks taken from the movie in addition to new ones. The new score invokes the Bond theme at certain points, and it's a blast to be driving around, getting chased, and having that music kick in. And also, I love the menu music. Seriously, I'll just stay on the mission map screen for like 10 minutes because I love it when like the horns come in. It's just, oh, it's really good. Overall, I really loved From Russia with Love, and honestly, this is one of the best movie-based tie-ins that I've played. It follows the plot of the film close enough, it adds exciting new set pieces for the player to engage in, and it's moderately challenging. The biggest negatives are the boss fights and the checkpoints, though even with these flaws, I still enjoyed my time with the game. Hell, I almost started playing it up again on the hard mode, like I said, after I got the upgrades, and frankly, any movie-based tie-in that makes me stick around after playing it is doing something right in my book. So come back tomorrow as the 12 Days of ChrisBondmas continues. Thanks for watching.